Everyone was expected to have their eye fixed on this Week 16 duel between the Broncos and Seahawks when the schedule makers drew this one up last spring. But coaches Dan Reeves and Chuck Knox could more aptly call this game the Desperation Bowl. The Seahawks have been eliminated from all postseason activity, and the Broncos have to win here, then hope for help from others just to make the playoffs. Denver's rugged defense, led by Pro Bowl end Rulon Jones, held Seattle to only 10 points in an earlier meeting that the Broncos won. And Jones knows they'll be asked to do more of the same here. But the hope is that the Mile High boys will get enough points out of their offense, led by quarterback John Elway, to make that task easier, as well as to quiet the noisy Kingdome crowd, the loudest and most distracting in the NFL. Unfortunately for those fans, there hasn't been as much to cheer about as they had hoped for in 1985. Preseason picks to go to the Super Bowl, the Seahawks have been inconsistent all year, much like their quarterback, Dave Craig. Unlike Denver, Seattle has little at stake in this game except to finish their season with a winning record, plus the opportunity to knock their bitter rivals in Denver out of the playoff picture for good. From the Kingdome, it's the Broncos and the Seahawks for the regular season finale on the NFL Game of the Week. The Seahawk defense has been one unit on the team that statistically has played well throughout the disappointing '85 campaign. On the game's opening drive, however, John Elway was successful against that defense when his pass blockers gave him time to hook up with targets like tight end Clarence Kay, number 88. But for most of the rest of the half, the Seahawk defense stuffed anything Denver's offense had to offer. And their pass rush, ranked second in the conference, fattened its sack total with 5 more at the expense of a scrambling Mr. Elway. Seattle would end its season with 61 sacks in all, a new team record, and each came in handy in the first half as the Seahawks used their defense to hold Denver and allow the offense to grab a quick lead of its own. This 41-yard touchdown strike from Dave Craig to Darrell Turner, number 81, was the 13th time the two had collaborated for a score this season, also a new club record. Turner averages nearly 20 yards per catch, and his long strides helped give Seattle an early 7-0 lead, although he would return to the spotlight a bit later in a more dubious role. While Turner is the man who scores most of the Seahawks' aerial touchdowns, the receiver they look for in crucial situations is All-Pro Steve Largent, number 80, who broke his own club record for receptions in a season with this catch, ending the year with 79 receptions, almost all of them timely. Largent's shifty moves got Denver defenders confused and gave Seattle's next drive a good start. Then a lucky bounce of the ball came in handy. But then the Seahawks hit a brick wall when touchdown maker Turner made 2 key drops that snuffed out hopes for another Seattle score. Turner giveth, but he also taketh away. And this critical miss off the flea flicker would come back to haunt Seattle for the rest of the game. On third down, the Seahawks were thwarted for good on a marvelous defensive effort from nickelback Randy Robbins, number 48. Robbins' alert play forced Seattle to settle for a field goal. But moments later, the renowned Seahawks special teams struck in what appeared to be the back-breaking play for Denver's playoff chances. Number 51, Sam Merriman blocked Chris Norman's punt, And the loose ball was returned by Terry Taylor, number 20, to give Seattle a commanding 17-0 lead midway through the second quarter. It was the second time this year the Seahawks had blocked a punt for a touchdown. And now things looked very bleak for the Broncos. They couldn't score. They weren't stopping Seattle's offense. They hadn't protected their quarterback. They couldn't even protect their punter. Any postseason hopes for Denver were now reduced to a barely flickering flame. The Broncos were in deep, deep trouble. These are the times when coaches really earn their pay, and it was up to Dan Reeves to find some way for his club to get back in this game. It didn't happen right off the bat as the pumped-up Seahawks sent Elway to the canvas on the first series after the blocked punt. But then Elway turned the game around with a masterful drive that accomplished two things. Elway moved his team for a score, and his scrambling began to tire out the hot pursuing Seahawks, who would lose some starch in their collars as the game wore on. The key play in Denver's first scoring drive was a brilliant 46-yard catch by wide receiver Clint Sampson, number 84, a grab that bolstered the flagging confidence of the Broncos. After Sampson's pretty-as-a-picture snare, Elway continued to exasperate the Seattle pass rushers as he avoided their pursuit and found Steve Watson in the end zone for the score. Watson, number 81, Denver's leading receiver, grabbed his fifth touchdown of the year by sliding past his defender, as well as another Bronco receiver in the pattern. Amidst all this traffic, Elway found his most reliable target, and the Broncos suddenly were back in the game. This touchdown did more than get Denver on the board. It literally changed the tempo of the contest. The once struggling Broncos had finally scored, and it fired up the defense as well. Seattle would pose no more offensive problems for the remainder of the half, as the Broncos stopped everything the Seahawks tried. When number 73, rookie Simon Fletcher, sacked Craig, there were just under 2 minutes to go before the half. If the Broncos could get one more tally, they would be in great position to come back in the second half of the game. Number 30, fullback Steve Sewell, started the final thrust. But then, to paraphrase Rodney Dangerfield, Sewell went to a boxing match when suddenly a football game broke out. The fermenting tempers had finally come to a boil in this emotional affair. Certainly Denver had much at stake in this game, but Seattle wanted to win too, to salvage what had been a frustrating season. Perhaps it was that very frustration that was coming to the surface now. But instead of channeling that energy in a useful manner, Seattle ran right past their targets. Using their zeal against the Seahawks, Elway finessed them with a textbook-perfect 2-minute drill that the Seahawks could not stop. With 9 seconds remaining, Elway hit a tightrope walking Butch Johnson for a sideline completion, paving the way for an easy field goal attempt for Rich Carlos as the final moments expired. From 25 yards out, Carlos connected, and the once dead-in-the-water Broncos were looking healthier by the minute. The Broncos had been two different teams in the first half, both horrid and heavenly. Now, with 30 minutes left in their season, they would have to beat just one team, the Goodwin, if they were going to salvage their playoff chances. As the second half got underway, the Seahawks were well aware that their 17-10 lead was not particularly safe. They had squandered a 17-point advantage, allowing Denver to get back in the game late in the second period. As the third quarter began, the Seattle defense looked to reassert itself, and the men in the blue appeared to force a critical turnover when safety John Harris nailed Bronco receiver Vance Johnson, number 82. But there would be no touchdown for Eugene Robinson, number 41. The play was ruled an incompleted pass, not a fumble. But the Seahawks had set the tone defensively, and they continued to hammer and harass Denver receivers. After Harris invited Clint Sampson over for dinner, and Sampson, not one to refuse such a pleasant invitation, accepted, the festivities resumed, with the Broncos hoping to surprise Seattle with this pass from punt formation. But punter Chris Norman's heave to linebacker Ricky Hundley fell harmlessly out of bounds, and Bronco trickery was foiled. Denver would quickly get the ball back, and this time John Elway, in a fine display of clutch quarterbacking, produced big throw after big throw on crucial third down plays. First, he hit Sampson for 18 yards, and then on another 3rd and 8, he drilled a strike to Butch Johnson, number 86. This Denver drive was Elway at his best, using his arm and his legs to pressure the Seahawk defense with throws to his wide receivers and his backs, like Gerald Wilhite, number 47. Late in the third quarter and still trailing 17-10, the Broncos were faced with a 4th and 8 at the Seahawk 35. Surprisingly, they went for the first down, and Elway calmly hit Wilhite for 16 yards. With their season on the line, the Broncos were holding nothing back. They were playing to make things happen, not waiting for them to happen. And when Elway found Vance Johnson on the left for 10 more yards, Denver had 1st and goal at the Seahawk 5-yard line. The scoreless third quarter had ended. The final period would turn into a seesaw battle. And it began when Wilhite culminated Denver's brilliant 16-play, 85-yard drive with this 1-yard scoring burst. The Broncos had now come all the way back. They had rebounded in their most important game of 1985 to tie Seattle 17-17. For Denver, it would all come down to the game's final 13 minutes. The defense started things off well for Denver. Following Wilhite's tying touchdown, a safety blitz by Dennis Smith forced Dave Craig to hurry his pass, and it was picked off by Michael Harden, number 31. The Broncos were now in excellent position at the Seahawk 26-yard line to take the lead and control of this struggle. But they would not capitalize, and all that resulted was this missed 34-yard field goal try by Rich Carlos. Carlos would get the chance to redeem himself later in the fourth period, but now it appeared that his miss had switched the momentum back to the Seahawks, and this appearance was not deceiving. Following this Craig pass of 16 yards to Byron Walker, number 89, Kurt Warner broke off his longest run of the season. This 38-yard burst through the middle of Denver's defense. Warner's sprint brought the ball inside the Broncos' 5-yard line. But at that point, the Denver defense stiffened. 3 Warner efforts were turned away. And with just over 5 minutes remaining in the game, the Seahawks had a decision to make. For Seattle, nothing was at stake. The sure field goal and the lead was the easy choice. But on 4th and goal from the 1, the Seahawks went back to their main man, Kurt Warner. Number 28 leaped into the end zone for the touchdown, and the Seahawks were in front once again, this time 24-17. Seattle, the preseason pick to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl, did not want its disappointing season to end at 8-8. A winning record would at least be a small consolation. Trailing by 7 with 5 minutes remaining in the game, the Broncos needed offensive leadership from John Elway. Elway, inconsistent much of 1985, this time delivered, and with a style and flair that has marked his performance. This 60-yard strike to Steve Watson suddenly and dramatically put Denver into scoring position. A field goal would not do in this situation. The Broncos had to have a touchdown. But Seattle's defense, like Denver's a few minutes before, would not go down without a fight. And they turned away 3 different Bronco runners until Denver was faced with a 4th down at the 1-yard line. With a little more than 2 minutes left in the game, Steve Sewell powered over, and the Broncos had once again come back. With an entire season at stake, Denver had not given in. The Broncos refused to die, and their efforts had now produced the tie. It would all come down to the final 2 minutes. The Broncos' defense did its job, and Elway and the offense got the ball back with good field position and more than enough time to score. On 1st down, Elway coolly set up the middle screen, and then Steve Sewell's speed and running ability took care of the rest. The 27-yard gain brought the Broncos into field goal range with 1.5 minutes on the clock, but they lost Elway to injury. It didn't matter. Number 7 had done his job. In his most important game, Elway had his finest game. He threw for a career-best 432 yards and played with a sense of leadership that the Broncos had to have in this must-win game. What mattered now was the foot of Rich Carlos. The Broncos' field goal kicker had not been at all consistent during most of 1985. But the past was not a concern. Only the present was important. From 43 yards, with 55 seconds remaining, Carlos was ready. Broncos led 27-24, but there was still time for Seattle to work into range for the field goal that could tie the score and send the game into overtime. Seahawk quarterback Dave Krieg, starting deep in his own territory, skillfully moved Seattle down the field with 3 completions, 2 of them to Byron Walker, number 89. With 9 ticks left on the clock, Craig's 3rd completion went to Eric Lane, and the Seahawk running back got out of bounds at the Denver 34-yard line. The Seahawks would have that chance to tie the score. The kick would come from 52 yards out, a distance Norm Johnson is capable of making. In this tense struggle, would the Seahawks bounce back on the game's final play? The answer was no, as the Seahawks fell 27-24. While Seattle wondered what went wrong in 1985, the Broncos wondered what they had to do to make the playoffs. Denver finished 11-5, a better record than 4 of the 10 teams that are going to postseason action. In a strange season, that irony does not seem out of the ordinary. But what is strange is that both Seattle and Denver are home for the playoffs.